your operations are more important. As a vendor, I will tell you that getting your food costs and your recipes right, getting your staffing right, getting your costs under control, getting your menu priced correctly is more important. Do that first. Because if that's out of whack, we can do all of the marketing in the world, but we're just throwing good money after bad.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Performance Revolution web series with our partners at Integra. We're excited to have the conversation today around unlocking restaurant growth. So how do we drive transactions and in that process, optimize the operation? The reality is in the industry today that anywhere in Canada or North America, we're seeing close to double-digit profit or transaction decline. So how do we change that trend for your operation? We want to share stories and context and experience through the incredible guests that we have here today. But most importantly, we're going to leave you with tactical solutions so you can go do different inside your operations today or tomorrow. So before we get into introductions, Sterling, what can the audience expect to take from your perspective from our conversation today?
Yeah, look, at Chowly, we've been watching over 17,000 restaurants go through the exact same problems that the rest of the nation and the rest of North America is going through. So excited to share a lot of tips and tricks that we've seen the successful ones do, pitfalls to avoid, and a little bit of market data that we get access to so we can start kind of projecting and see what we can do in 2025.
Awesome. So we're bringing fact-based solutions across a huge data set. James, I'd like you to introduce yourself to the audience. We just want to kind of that elevator pitch. Who are you, what do you do, and who do you serve?
Absolutely. Thank you. My name is James Merinuk. I'm Director of Business Solutions here at Integra, based out of the BC market. I've been in food service for over 20 years, working with small business to national and international accounts across North America. So certainly have a little bit of scope on the subject.
And James, I just want to share, because Sterling will connect with this. James was off skiing in Whistler on the weekend. They got a bunch of snow. I'm sitting in Ontario. It's flat as ever. Nobody leaves to come somewhere in Colorado.
I'm out in Denver. It's been over 2 weeks since we've gotten any snow. So we need some too.
So Sterling, let the audience know who are you, what does your company do, and who do you serve?
Yeah. So I'm Sterling Douglas. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Chowly. We focus on providing technology solutions to help simplify restaurants' businesses. We particularly serve the independent operator in the SMB space. We've got over 17,000 restaurants on the platform. And our newest product, our platform product, really centered around giving back your time and getting you more orders and simplifying restaurants' business.
Awesome. And just to jump in, because I want the people to hear, sometimes we're inside the four walls of our operation, or if you have multiple locations, we're still inside the four walls. And I think there's an opportunity to learn from what's really happening in the industry, so you know you're not alone. But Sterling, based on the visibility that you have, what are we looking at in respect to health of the industry? The kind of the code word or tag word for today might be transactions. But what's happening in the industry, and why is it so important to really look at that for your own business and your community?
Yeah, I think for us, we look at a handful of different data sources, but one of the kind of the North Star metrics that we look at when we're kind of evaluating the industry is just foot traffic, restaurant foot traffic. And what we saw was over 18 straight months of foot traffic contraction throughout the industry. Every month when we looked at year-over-year numbers that were in contraction. December and November were the first months since 2023 that we actually saw expansion of foot traffic. I'm a huge data person, so there's some nuance there in terms of how many weekends or days and the way the holidays place. But when I see that, and it's the first time I've seen it in over almost 2 years, that tells me that we're pretty close to bottoming out on some of the foot traffic and on some of the trends that we've seen. We saw record restaurant closures in the U.S. in particular across 2024. My hope and my prediction is that in 2025 we're going to start seeing more and more increases in foot traffic as we're kind of bottoming out now, and are going to start kind of climbing that that curve as we get into this year.
Yeah. And I had a chance, we're looking at global trends for the education of our audience. So how do we bring global experience? The U.S. experience is the same as the Canadian experience. It's echoed to the economic results that we've been able to see, or results from other third-party reservation companies that have shared. We're seeing common trends to the U.S. James, in your experience, are you seeing the same or hearing the same type of reality inside your partner's business?
Absolutely. I mean, I can sort of go back to a conversation I had yesterday where a customer was like, "Yeah, I think we're sort of through it, right? We've seen the increases in menu costs. We've seen how this is going. We've made those adjustments, and now we're sort of we're ready to grow again. We've sort of gotten through the worst of it." So yeah, I've definitely seen that from talked to a customer just yesterday about it.
Okay.
Yeah, on the cost side of that, James, I mean, if you were to look at food costs, which you called out, up somewhere around 30% the last few years, but so are labor costs, and so is rent, and even payment processing costs.
Yeah.
And so you start stacking these up over what's happened over the past few years. The business model for the restaurants changed. And so what I think really started taking shape towards the end of 2024 is that the restaurants that were adapting to those changes, whether it be through not just price increases, which should come, but that's one part of the equation, but how they're spending their time, how they're simplifying their business, what their tech spend is. It seems like they've been able to do those adaptations. And like you said, now that they've kind of gotten through that adaptation to the new market conditions, it's time to grow. We're seeing the same thing.
Yeah. And I want the audience to know why we started here. It's intentional. So a lot of us, we know where we're at. You live in your business every single day, but sometimes we just need to pause. And what I heard from Sterling and James there is, in order to get the results we want and deserve, we need to do different. My intention in driving the conversation today is push up against your resistance. My belief in the work that I do, if you hear something today where just push back, it doesn't feel right, it feels uncomfortable. You might not necessarily agree with us and you don't have to. But often where we find resistance is where we need to do some work. And what Sterling shared there is the restaurant model has changed. And Sterling looks at it through a different lens. James said looking at it through an Integra lens. So if it's changed and we don't change, what's the outcome? And I'm not a fear-based person. We do need to change. But what's the opportunity if you do? And so can we go into a couple of those points that you just shared? What are top operators doing, around tech spend, around operational efficiency, around driving transactions?
Yeah, this was really interesting. So last year, I did about a dozen workshops where we talked to 500 plus independent operators, and we were talking about a profitability framework, with the whole premise of it being, how do we get more orders? And as we were going through those workshops, I got a chance to talk to a lot of these operators. And I got a chance to hear, hey, I was doing that thing that you talked about. It's worked really well. Or, hey, I noticed you didn't talk about this particular subject. We've been doing that. And so some examples of those things, anyone who was really ready to kind of capitalize on catering, we saw a pretty good pattern match there, right? Because catering isn't just having a separate ordering platform where you have big items, right? Catering, involves a huge investment around your sales, what corporations are near you, how are you doing unit economics on that? Do you have something that's kind of scalable? Do you have a good kitchen program to be able to handle the influx, right? So the ones who had kind of made that investment already, right, in 2023 or even before the pandemic, in 2024, they were able to capture that as a lot of people came back to work. So that'd be one example of something that we saw. And then another one that I would say is just any restaurant that I talked to that either was already super invested in their digital storefront or began investing heavily in their digital storefront in 2024, we saw a lot of success. And the digital storefront, I mean, this is every way that one of your customers interacts with your business outside of your four walls. Right. So how they're giving you reviews, your Google business profile, your website, all of those things. And so those were two kind of particular patterns that we saw last year.
And the one thing, because we're hearing catering for me will be the major focus of 2025 conversation, right? When we look at the conference schedule and what's coming up. But I think that side, if you've done catering in the past, so we've done it and tried it. We're not saying to do what you did in the past, is step back and look what you do. We had a great conversation with Kelly around catering. Is incredible, just on what we can do and how we could drive profitability. Before we go to James and share about how you've seen your partners optimize, can you just tell us, because I think the digital storefront is language that's becoming very common. But can we just I just want the audience to really just slow that down and hear it. So we share Google reviews and your website. What are the elements? Because it is Like, if you think of myself as a guest, that's where I start my guest experience anywhere I go, whether I'm in my home city or traveling.
In 2025, Google is going to be the single largest restaurant discovery tool there is. Everyone calls things like DoorDash or Uber Eats or Grubhub kind of like this discovery tool for consumers. But the reality is that traffic is shifting massively over to Google. And so, in my opinion, and everything that we see from the work we do, Google is the biggest door on your digital storefront, right? I think of the digital storefront as you have kind of multiple doors, right, to your restaurant.
Yep.
So you've got Google is the biggest one. Your website is the next biggest. I would actually argue, and I spoke to some folks at Google about this, Google is actually almost your biggest front door on the digital landscape. And so it's your website, it's your Google page. Depending on your area, it could be TripAdvisor. You also have elements of your digital storefront if you're on mobile versus desktop, right? 80% of web traffic for restaurants actually comes from mobile. Most restaurants, when they're looking at their website, they're looking at their computer. That's not how their guests are doing it.
Yep.
Right. And so
100%.
these are the elements that kind of make up your digital storefront.
So, and I think I just want us, if you're listening to this right now, think about yourself as a guest as you engage with any retailer. So it could be any retail environment, but bring it back to when you go out to restaurants outside your home city. And where do you look and what do you see? And I think the one thing we've covered a couple times is making sure that we're mobile optimized. You know, and I'm not an expert in this space, but there's a way to be mobile readable, but mobile optimized. But James, I want to come to you and just because I've heard, and a lot of my partners are partners with Integra. And it's not about just Integra, but how have you worked with some of your partners to really get that operational shift or to get a win with them when it comes to transactions or finding them space and time in their weeks?
Absolutely. I mean, as a partner with our customers, we're always looking for opportunities to help them along. And I think it's just a matter of my experience has been the last year really has been, you know, we have options for you. We do have ways that we can help and really educating them. I think that our programs in the past have always been fairly one-sided, where we work with the food and that's what we do. Yeah. And that's where our clients can take advantage. But it's the other vendors that can really save them time in their operations and help them from that perspective, whether that's online vendors, whether that's helping with negotiations with other companies that they're using outside the food service and outside sort of the distribution model. And even touching a little bit on whether that's marketing or whether that's HR based or whatever, we have solutions that can help them. And a lot of times they feel a little lost of where should we go and why. And we definitely have partners that we've worked with along the way that can help with that.
Love it. And then, I want to get into some of the tactical things. So one thing when I'm looking with operators, they get a chance to go in. And any leader I meet with isn't saying, I've got more time in my week and my day. We're all overworked, overwhelmed, over capacity. So on the side right now, I looked at what could the return on time or the return on impact be if we found 2 hours a week? 2 hours a week would be 2 weeks of the year. Mm-hmm. Get 2 full weeks to reinvest in our people and our guests. Or if we found 4 hours a week. Often I think we need to find dozens of hours to focus on these new initiatives. But if we just pull it down to its basic parts, Sterling, leaders of restaurants say as the model has changed in your language, and I love that. How do we find time? How do they work with their partners to find time, and where are the most critical areas to do so?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of opportunities to find more time for our restaurant operators, but they do require an upfront investment, not necessarily a monetary investment, but a time investment. Yeah. So similar to what you're saying, we talk to operators a lot about the return on time, right? If they are going to invest in a new relationship, right, with a new vendor, whether that be a technology, equipment, a maintenance person, what are they going to get out of that? Is that going to save time long term? Or is it going to, I'm just got to get this thing done now, so I'm just going to do it myself, or I'm just going to do this because it's the quickest way now. If you can afford to have kind of the discipline and take some of that investment risk by making that time investment up front so that you can save time later, those things stack up, right? There's not going to be a lot of vendors, Matt, that can come to you and be like, yeah, if you spend a couple days with us, we'll automatically save you 4 hours a week, every week moving forward. The reality is that most of the things that you're going to invest in are going to save you 30 minutes, maybe an hour a week. But you have to continually stack them. I always say restaurants are the most deceptively difficult business model, right? There's perishable goods in a just-in-time manufacturing, plant in the back with a live showroom and customers in the front. That is an incredibly difficult business model. And when you have incredibly difficult business models, you have to kind of be operationally maniacal. And so if you want to get into details on tactics, there are tools that can do things like update your hours across your different platforms.
Yeah.
Right. So when we talk about digital storefronts, if you have a Google page, Yelp page, your website, and your point of sale, and you are going to be closed for the holidays, you need to go through 4 different places and change the time.
Yeah.
And if you don't change that time, right now, your digital storefront showing up closed to certain users and to certain customers when you may be open, or the opposite, they're going to your store and you end up being closed, which is a terrible experience. And so that tool, when you talk to an operator, like, well, that's going to save me 15, 30 minutes a month. And I was like, yeah, exactly. And there are 10 more other opportunities that you should be seeking out for that same one. I mean, stop searching for silver bullets. Right, start searching for lead bullets and continually stack them to help build the business.
Yeah, I think a great point to pause. And so, I think just if we think about that, if we think about lead bullets instead of silver bullets, there's not just the one solution that's going to fix. And we'll have other conversations around the human interaction and the team leadership, and then our digital storefronts. But how do we really look at it? I'm going to change gears, and this isn't something I expected to cover. But in both your experience, James, I'll come to you first, and
Sure.
Sterling will come back to you. Because we've all met with hundreds of restaurant operators in our career. What do you feel like? What is the resistance you hear? Just so the audience can hear, what is something what's the complexity? What's in the way from somebody moving towards a solution? And I want to move away from us having something for them.
Yep.
It's our experience of witnessing, and because our job is to I sell ideas for a living. How do I get somebody to buy into something? And if I don't get the buy-in, they don't get the execution. So share a little bit, James, what's in the way you think for the operator today?
Yeah, for sure. I think sometimes it's just straight up overwhelming where I don't know where to start. I have multiple vendors or whatever that is pulling me in 17 different directions, telling me which one is best all the time, and we're best and we're best and we're best. So, who do I trust? So I think that's certainly part of it is they don't know where to start and they're looking for almost that referral, that Google 5-star, yep, that's the one, that I should get, and it's almost analysis paralysis to a certain extent. So that's jumped out at me more recently, where where do I start, what do I do, and who do I go with when I make a decision that I want to do something like that.
And I'll leave that conversation with you because this is the opportunity in all partners. All 3 of us are partners to restaurants. We don't exist without a healthy industry. So there is an opportunity to reach out at a certain point and just have the conversation. Can you provide social proof of something that works? Can you provide a solution? Can you just hear their want and need? Because the reality is right now, if we experience double-digit transaction decline for most operators in the Canadian market, we will break even or lose money. The average restaurant in the Canadian market makes less than 5% net pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, we're in the 3.6, 3.7% net profit range. We have to do different. Mm-hmm. So James, share a little bit about what's in the way, and we can't step over it until we understand what it is. Sterling, you've had the opportunity to work 17,000 locations have chosen to find that lead bullet, as part of your solution. What's motivating that? What's motivating the change? It's not just you have a great solution, but there's something in that equation that's making people to do different that you're leading on scale.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things. I think to James' point, they're getting pulled into a lot of directions, right? When you have that super complicated business model, right? You have to be a manufacturing expert and an expert with your guests, among many other things. It creates a really long and varied list. And so I think of there's a little framework called the Eisenhower matrix, where it's like all the things you need to do can be in 4 boxes, urgent and important, urgent, not important, not urgent, important, not urgent, not important, right? So everything's kind of a combination of urgency and important. And in the restaurant space, everything can be put in the urgent box because everything is just in time. Everything is right in front of you. And that makes it really difficult to set aside time to work on the things that are not urgent, but important.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest box to spend time in.
Yep.
But the ones who do spend time in it, now they're actually looking at the right part of their business. And you ask kind of like, all right, the social proof, like why do they pick, Chowly? Then from my side, it's trust.
Yeah.
Because those workshops that we did last year, I didn't tell them that Chowly would solve all of their problems. Like we do a lot of things to fit within the framework, but I have a slide very early before I mention anything about Chowly that basically says, none of this will work if your operations aren't set. Your operations are more important. As a vendor, I will tell you that getting your food costs and your recipes right, getting your staffing right, getting your costs under control, getting your menu priced correctly is more important. Do that first. Because if that's out of whack, we could do all of the marketing in the world, but we're just throwing good money after bad if that's not right. So there is a bit of a sequencing. And I think one of the reasons Chowly does well is because we're not afraid to admit that, right? And to help that restaurant, because we want the restaurant to be successful, right? If the restaurant's successful, then we're successful. And we do that by making sure that we're sharing as much of that information and knowledge as possible. And that includes, hey, maybe you should work on X before you start working on something like Google Ads.
Yeah. That to me, I just want to hold there. It's the second time in 2 days and I related back to Stephen Covey, where we recommended people go back to a chapter of 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, First Things First. Like it's an old book. I used to have the tape and play it in my car, and in my home, it was a terrible car. But I played and listened to it. It's just the first things first strategy. But I also want to look at just, James, on your side, like Sterling, we have to be able to find the time, but going back to trust. So in the work that I do, and I've done this work with Tony Robbins, we have an absolute human need for trust. But what trust does is trust leads to safety. And that is an underlying core human need. So how can people, and I could go on for an hour around that because it's so foundational, but we don't talk about it. How do you create trust with your partner? So what's an example where somebody put their trust in you? I want the audience to hear this, right? You need to trust your partners where you can go and find a solution. Because my phone rings all the time to say, I bought a solution or signed with a partner and it's not working. And I said, that's not the case. It works on scale. What's the miss in the partnership that's not working, that didn't allow the technology, the solution to work? How do you build trust, James? You're world class at it, but share with the audience.
Absolutely. I mean, really what it comes down to is, our ultimate, our partnerships with the different companies that we work with and the longevity that they've been in the market, reputation that they have as well. So we build trust based on, the partners that we have and that we've trusted and have worked with forever. I mean, whether that's a Heinz or a Hellmann's or whoever that is in the market, these are brand leaders, Coca-Cola. Our customers trust those brands, and we support those brands and help our customers maximize on rebates with those customers. So that and making sure that we're there and available for our customers when they need us with any request, whether that's I need a new oven, or help me figure out what the cheapest or what the best product is for my new menu that's going to help me maximize rebates and whatnot. But it builds, right? It's small. You help me with something small, help me with something a little bit bigger, and then let's tackle this thing together. What else you got? What else you got? So it takes time. It certainly takes time. But it is a slow build and just like
and I think of that, James, too. I mean, it's almost like you have to get an opportunity, to be honest, right? You have to have an opportunity, and sometimes those opportunities take place in tough conversations, right? So one of the parts of the Chowly platform is a mobile app, right? That will build for restaurants. But the reality is most independent operators aren't necessarily ready for that type of investment. Right? Every operator wants to grow up and be Starbucks, McDonald's, and have this amazing mobile app experience, and we can help with that. But not every restaurant's ready. And so we actually talk a lot when they ask about it, like, hey, like, do you have an adoption plan after this?
Yeah.
Right? What are you doing to incentivize guests? Is there a loyalty component that's set up with it? Are you incentivizing your staff to encourage downloads? A big reason to have an app is to collect data, right? Are you going to be able to use that data? Are you ready for that right now? And it's okay if you're not. Like, we can still get you started with X, Y, and Z, and we can help you get there. But that's an opportunity to build trust by kind of having a tough conversation.
Yeah. And I think the side going back to technology is like there's a sign or a frame behind me that talks about execution. So my side is like, we can see this solves X need. But what I always ask is who owns it? Who owns the relationship with Integra? Who owns implementation? Who owns coaching? I think there's induction, training, coaching, recognition, and reward. It's not how do I get somebody to serve my table? We got to support them through their journey as they work with us. So it's like having those questions. And I think what you see here is how do we get into the prickly part with intention? My job as coach is to create positive, passionate conflict. That's what I do for a living. If we don't have conflict, we're probably just getting into a conversation we're all agreeing to that we're not going to execute. And I say that because I've failed, to Sterling's point, when I didn't get into the hard conversations inside my own business or inside my partners. But just as we look forward, as we kind of go into the last couple of questions of this episode, what I want to do is like we've got a good understanding of where we are. We've talked about some solutions, how we can reach out to Integra, but more importantly, what we can consider for change inside our own operation. If we were all to go into an investment right now and look at a restaurant, like Sterling, from your perspective, we go out, we raise some cash, we're going to start a restaurant group. What are the core focuses? I'm sure you've went out and done a raise of funding for different things at different times. But where would you go all in heading into 2025 to have a successful restaurant? And what I love is, that experience of thinking about the total operator, not just what we do. Where would you double down your time, your focus? What matters most for today's operator?
I think that the first place that I would likely look is how are we going to have the operational excellence that we need for this restaurant in today's restaurant market? Like, operational excellence is absolutely critical, right? You have to be able to have your staff correctly. You have to be able to get your food costs right. You have to be able to have that good guest experience. I think that after that, right now you get to look at what are the opportunities in your hyper local area for that restaurant group, right? So is the opportunity, is it more corporate and it should be catering focused? Is it more residential and we should be more digital, right? Should we be more community focused, right? There are a lot of different pieces of the business that you can look at after you've got your strong operational foundation. And a lot of that can be determined on where you're physically located. And so when I think about investing in a restaurant group, the first thing I look at is that operational excellence, and then the second thing is where are the opportunities. And a lot of time those opportunities are hyper local. It's only within that 5 to 10 mile radius, and that will actually dictate a lot of the strategy for the restaurant, rather than just what they may want to do or think is good at that moment.
Yeah, that's fun. Like sometimes you just got to pause, right? So the hyper local. One of my favorite questions is, why does your community need your restaurant to exist? Which is my question. It's not. It's Patrick's question, because there's more seats. But I think if there's a note, if you're right on your phone or listening, just write down hyper local. Come back to that over your coffee, or have that conversation. What does that mean to you? What could it look like? Tactically, James, like if you look to say, like in 2025, we're going to help our partners do X.
Honestly, I just want to make connections, right? I want to help my clients make more connections with whether it's our vendors, and just help them maximize what they can take home, right? I want them to squeeze every cent out of every purchase that they possibly can in all facets of their business. Right. I mean, more important now than ever. They're looking for that, and sometimes I think. They forget to circle back with maybe a partner that they've been with for forever and a day, or maybe haven't looked at a partner that they've worked with forever and a day and looked at other options, right? There's opportunity there. And And sometimes you just need to reach out and ask some questions, right? So like you said earlier, right? Get a little prickly and, what do you do for me? What have you done for me lately?
That vendor checkup though, that is so good. Because two quick examples. There are online ordering companies, like first party online orderings. If you signed up with them 5 years ago, there was this weird premise that pictures of your food wasn't important on online ordering, right? That was a thing in 2018 and 2019. Now it's not even talked about anymore. But if you haven't looked at your online ordering vendors since 2018-19 because you haven't kind of like had an issue, right? Like this is something where that vendor checkup would be really helpful. And the second one that I think that checkup, your vendors likely came out with new stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Especially if it's a technology company, like they should be coming up with new stuff every 3 or so months. And so we do have calls every once in a while with our customers. We're like, hey, I know you've come out with a ton of new stuff over the past year. We haven't had time to look at it. Like, what do you think is a good fit for us? Like, we love that conversation, right? Like, because we get to say this might be a good fit. We came out with this thing called dynamic pricing, but for your brand, that's probably not going to work as well. But maybe like this other thing will. Like that, those types of conversations, like as an operator, like you should literally have a vendor list and think of like, when was the last time you talked to them? Because you might realize it's been a while.
Huge.
Love that. And I think that side that what we're trying to share here is, there's results. Average in our industry right now is going to be in trouble. How do we reach out to our partners to truly have that win-win relationship? And that sounds like cheesy language, win-win language. It's not. We're in this together. It's not a BS idea. So we want to come together, make sure that there's a focus of how do we support each other? How can you help me now based on what you're seeing? And your partners have more visibility. Just to close this out, I'm going to do two things. At the end, we'll do a one-word close about the industry 2025. But you both have so much success in your careers. If you could go back to your 20-year-old self and teach yourself one lesson, because the reality, there's a leader on the other side of this, not a brand, not a door, but yet. They're going to walk through that door, lead that door, but there's a leader. What's a leadership lesson you would go back and teach your 20-year-old self that would have accelerated your success, your journey, your connection, your joy, your happiness? Whichever that is for you, what's the lesson to your 20-year-old self? Sterling, we'll start with you.
Oh, dang, I was really hoping you'd go James first.
Yeah, I thought you were but I thought I could take it's my only chance.
A lesson I would teach to my 21-year-old self. There were a handful of things that I read and I knew, but I didn't do. And so what I'd probably tell my 21-year-old self is anything that you learn or you hear of, practice actually executing it. So that you really internalize it. Like I used to think I was a very direct communicator because I could speak eloquently. I'm pretty good at taking ideas in my head and saying them out loud and kind of communicating the points that I'm trying to make. But what I didn't really realize is that direct communication means so much more than that. Direct communication means having those harder conversations that we talked about, right? It's about telling someone that they may not be reaching the standard you think they can. And I don't think I did that enough until I got a little bit older. And so I would tell my 21-year-old self, when you hear these different skills or these things that you learn, you might think you're good at them, truly understand and then practice each part of it and really internalize those things. I think that would be something I wish I did more of for sure.
And I can relate to that. One of the biggest ahas in my career path was we hired this incredible coach for a retreat down in Mexico. When we got there, my peer group told me what we paid the coach. I almost threw up in my mouth. It was a ridiculous amount of money. And what he said to us, he said, I'm going to walk out of your life in 48 hours and I'm probably never going to see you again. But he said, stop consuming and start executing. He actually pulled two of us aside and said, stop reading the 38 books. Why don't you read one and do it?
Right.
That's great.
And he coaches some of the world's top sports team there. He's all over, incredible guy. He's got a great program called Brave Soul out of Ireland, and a bunch of other ones. But just that was 12 years ago. And every time I pick up a book or I consume content online, or are you watching this, what are you going to do differently tomorrow for you? Be selfish, that we're not taught to be, and execute. James, what's one lesson you go back and teach your 20-year-old self?
Yeah, very similar to Sterling, quite honestly, is don't be afraid to sort of push back and ask the questions. Like early in my career, you deal with the chef or an owner or whatever, and they would sort of put you in the hot seat a little bit and ask the hard question. And, at that time, you're like, well, they're just kind of being a pain. Like, what's the deal? But, they're trying to have, sort of circling back, those prickly conversations and get it out of the way and see where you go from there, right? So don't be afraid to do that early and do it often and ask the question and learn as much as you can early on, rather than the opposite of sort of avoiding it and assuming everything's going to be okay from that perspective, because that conversation is going to come up eventually, and it's probably going to be a lot more negative. So don't avoid it is, I think, probably more my advice.
I love it. And we're right on schedule. 34 minutes, 40 seconds. I told you, Sterling, that's exactly where we'd be.
Nice.
One last question for you. What's one word that summarizes hospitality in 2025? I'll share with you a previous episode that got down to the word that still resonates with hospitality is resilience. I don't want to project that onto you, but what's one word that kind of defines what it's going to take to succeed in 2025?
I mean, resilience, I love that one. That's also a core value at Chowly. But if I had to pick one word, I think it's acceleration.
Yeah.
I think that we got to accelerate learning. We got to accelerate adoption. We've got to accelerate how quickly we adapt to the changing markets, because they're only going to change faster, not slower.
Brilliant. Thank you. James?
Yeah, I mean, I generally lean to perseverance. It's sort of suited me well,
That's just another word for resilience.
Yeah, I know.
We're going to let him slide on that one. It's it.
I know. As soon as I heard it, I was like, you took mine, but I'm using it. And gosh, I mean, through COVID and the last couple of years, I mean, resilience, perseverance. Yeah, it's really just, keep your head down, keep doing some of the things we talked about, and I'm sure others do as well. And the operators that are learning and adapting, like you said, Sterling, are going to have success.
Love it. I wanted to thank you both so much for your time and to share your experience. The last message that we have: take what you heard today. You got to filter it out. Lots of ideas. Pick one, execute to get you what you deserve in your operation. James, thank you so much for your time. Sterling, appreciate you and how you're helping so many leaders and operators in our industry. Thanks to all that watched, and thanks to our partners at Integra for the opportunity. We couldn't do it without you.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Thank you.
Smart businesses are working with group purchasing organizations. Smarter businesses are working with Integra. That's because we are much more than a GPO. We provide more experience, more product categories, and more operational solutions. Integra is expert advice, quality and flexibility, purchasing power, and partnership to optimize your operations, elevating guest experience while saving on goods and services with the insights to keep your operations ahead. We know the challenges of operating in restaurants, lodging, senior living, golf, leisure, faith-based organizations, education, and acute care. So we provide services and solutions to help you maximize your profit margins. Save up to 30% on nearly everything you buy. From food to furniture, fixtures, uniforms, linens, capital equipment, services, energy, cleaning, and even training. Add in advice from experts who know your industry, and there's no better partner to take on inflation than Integra. With a deep bench of procurement experts monitoring prices, contracts, and supply chains, we help you find cost-effective ingredient options that exceed your customers' expectations. At Integra, your spend is always in your view and in your control, with data analytics and digital tools to ensure you're always getting the insights to operate more efficiently. Gain easy access to temporary and long-term staffing, your most frequently purchased products, and solutions for waste reduction and energy usage to keep your customers returning and your operations thriving. Unlock expert insights, unmatched purchasing, and unlimited performance for your business. Meet Integra and see the difference today.